Today, we are jumping right into a high-stakes geopolitical chess match that's playing out in Iraq. It's this incredible story of a nation that's caught between two major powers. And really, it all comes down to one pretty provocative question.
Let's just put it out there. Is the United States essentially blackmailing its own ally, Iraq? Is it using the power of the dollar and its security leverage to try and push back against Iran? It's a really loaded question, and trying to answer it opens up this incredibly complex power struggle, one that has massive implications for the entire Middle East.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. First, we'll look at why Iraq is at the center of all this. Then, we'll get into America's big financial squeeze and how Iran responded with its own political moves. After that, we'll see how a really fragile ceasefire was pushed to the absolute brink, which leads us right to the diplomatic stalemate we're seeing today.
All right, first things first, let's set the stage. Ever since 2003, Iraq has been this incredibly complex space where both Washington and Tehran are constantly competing for influence, and that's what makes it this central arena for this really intense rivalry.
And this right here, this shows you the heart of the problem. On one side, you've got the United States, which sees Iraq as this crucial strategic partner. But on the other side, you've got Iran, which has spent years building these deep political and military connections, especially through powerful militia groups. And who's stuck right in the middle of this tug-of-war? Iraq.
So, how did the U.S. make its first big play in this game? Well, it wasn't with soldiers or tanks. It was with money. Washington decided it was time to weaponize the U.S. dollar.
And the move they made was wow. It was dramatic. The U.S. Treasury literally blocked a cargo plane that was supposed to deliver almost $500 million in cash, physical U.S. banknotes, to Baghdad. And get this wasn't aid money. This was Iraq's own money from its oil sales held at the Federal Reserve in New York.
Now, this wasn't some random decision. There was a reason for it. For weeks leading up to this, militias backed by Iran had been attacking U.S. facilities in Iraq. So the U.S. retaliated by cutting off the cash. The goal was pretty simple: put the financial squeeze on Baghdad to get them to finally rein in those militias.
But publicly, well, Iraq pushed back, and they pushed back hard. Their central bank put out a statement basically saying, hey, we're not short of US dollars, we've fulfilled all the requests. They were really trying to project stability and, prevent a total panic in their local markets, even while this intense pressure from Washington was building behind the scenes.
Of course, a financial move that big doesn't just go unanswered. Iran immediately launched its own countermove, but theirs was a political power play, right on the ground in Baghdad.
So what did they do? Iran sent in its top general, Esmail Khani. He's the head of the elite Quds Force, which is the foreign operations wing of the Revolutionary Guard, and his mission was huge. He was there meeting with militia leaders, trying to get all the pro-Iran political parties to agree on a new prime minister, and figuring out the long-term plan for these militias inside Iraq's own security forces.
And the U.S. response to this political maneuvering was, well, it was blunt. When it looked like a pro-Iran coalition was about to nominate Nouri al-Maliki, a guy seen as very close to Tehran, President Trump reportedly sent a direct threat. If al-Maliki comes back, all that vital U.S. aid gets cut off. It was a clear political line in the sand.
So you've got this financial pressure, you've got these political threats, and at the exact same time, the military situation was getting incredibly tense. There was this fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran, and it was ticking down to zero, bringing both sides right to the edge of a new conflict.
Just look at this timeline. It shows you what a pressure cooker this 1 week was. The ceasefire kicks off on April 11th. Just a few days later, on the 19th, Iran deliberately releases these provocative videos of its underground missile sites. Then, just a single day before it was all set to expire, Trump makes this last-minute announcement to extend the truce. It was a real nail-biter.
So you might be asking, why was Iran posturing like that? Well, it turns out they weren't just sitting on their hands during the ceasefire. Reports were coming out that Iran was using that pause in the fighting to aggressively rebuild its military, getting its forces back to almost 70% of their pre-war strength. And they weren't exactly quiet about it either. A top commander from the IRGC Aerospace Force, S. Majid Mousavi, actually boasted about it. He said that their speed in reloading missile and drone launchers during the ceasefire was even faster than their pace before the war. It was a clear message: we're rearming, and we're doing it fast.
So when you put it all together, the financial pressure, the political games, the military posturing, you end up right here. This is the final piece of the puzzle. a complete and total diplomatic deadlock. Both sides say they want to talk, but their conditions for peace are completely different.
And this table just lays out the standoff perfectly. The U.S. position is the financial blockade stays up. It's leverage. A new deal has to be agreed to before we'll even think about lifting it. Meanwhile, Iran says the blockade is an act of war and that it has to be lifted before they'll even come to the table. It's the classic, no, you go first, standoff.
And President Trump's statement really left no room for doubt. He directly tied keeping the ceasefire going to keeping the blockade going, saying it would stay in place until Iran came up with a new proposal. The message was clear. The pressure is staying on.
So in the end, we're left with this really dangerous cycle of pressure and retaliation. And that brings us to the final crucial question. With both sides locked in this pattern and neither willing to blink first, is any kind of diplomatic breakthrough even possible? Or is Iraq just destined to stay the battleground in this massive geopolitical tug-of-war?